The day the sky filled with shadows was a Tuesday. Alan Russell remembered that clearly because he had planned to take his wife to dinner that evening for their anniversary. Instead, he stood in the control room of Earth Defense Command, watching as massive black ships appeared in orbit around Earth. "Sir, we're getting readings unlike anything we've ever seen," said Lisa Winters, her fingers flying across the control panel. "Their energy signatures are off the charts." Alan nodded, his mouth dry. After 15 years in the United Earth Defense Force, he had prepared for this moment his entire career. First contact. But not like this. Not with warships. Any response? "To our communications?" he asked. Lisa shook her head. "Nothing yet. Wait. Incoming transmission." The main screen flickered, revealing a creature that looked like a cross between a lizard and an insect. Its exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian, and multiple eyes blinked independently across its face. "People of Earth," it spoke in perfect English, though its mouth didn't match the words. "I am Commander Zaxvorn of the Krell Dominion. Your world is now under our protection. Resistance is unnecessary and will be met with correction." Alan stepped forward. "This is Captain Alan Russell of the United Earth Defense Force. We have no quarrel with your people. Perhaps we can discuss—" "There is nothing to discuss," Zaxvorn interrupted. "You have 48 hours to surrender control of your planetary resources. After that, we will begin the purification process." The screen went dark. "Get me the president," Alan said quietly. While global leaders scrambled to respond, Alan made a quick call to his wife, Dr. Samantha Russell. "Sam, I need you. At the base, bring your team." Samantha was already watching the news. "The aliens? You think my xenobiology research might help?" "I think it might be our only chance." Hours later, Samantha and her team set up in a laboratory beneath the command center. They worked frantically, analyzing the limited data available from scans of the Krell ships. "Their biology is silicon-based," Samantha told Alan when he came to check on their progress. "And from what we can tell from the visual data, their nervous system might be vulnerable to certain frequencies." Before Alan could respond, an alarm blared through the facility. "Captain Russell to command immediately," a voice called over the speakers. Back in the control room, the atmosphere was grim. On the main screen, satellite footage showed a small uninhabited island in the Pacific. Then a beam of light shot down from one of the Krell ships. When it disappeared, the island was gone, leaving only churning water. "A demonstration," Lisa whispered. The Krell commander appeared on screen again. "This is what awaits resistance. We can target with precision. Your 48 hours continues. Military forces worldwide mobilized, but reports confirmed what they already feared. Conventional weapons had no effect on the Krell ships. Missiles disappeared in flashes of light before impact. Fighter jets were swatted from the sky by invisible forces." That evening, Lisa called Alan into her office. "I've been analyzing their communications," she said, pointing to patterns on her screen. "They're talking to someone else, not just among themselves, and I've managed to translate some of it." "What do they say?" Alan asked. "They've done this before. I count references to 17 other species they've purified. And, sir, they're collecting specimens." "For what purpose?" Lisa looked pale. "The translation isn't perfect, but it seems religious. Something about consuming the worthy to achieve elevation." That night, Alan found Samantha still working in the lab. She had dark circles under her eyes, but looked up with excitement when he entered. "We found something," she said. "They're neural pathways. They process fear differently than we do. It triggers a biochemical reaction that could potentially be exploited." Alan sat beside her. "How?" "A targeted pathogen. Something that could affect their unique biology." "You're talking about a biological weapon." Samantha nodded slowly. "I know how it sounds, but we're running out of options." Alan took her hand. "If there's a chance it could work." Their moment was interrupted by a call. Alan was needed in a secure meeting room deep within the facility. 5 military leaders from different countries sat around a table with several scientists in white coats. At the center of the table sat a black case. General Frank Patterson nodded to Alan. Captain Russell, we're activating Project Nightmare. I've never heard of it, Alan said. Black budget. Started after we discovered possible alien signals 10 years ago. It's a failsafe, a bioweapon designed to work on non-terrestrial biology. One of the scientists spoke up. We need Dr. Russell's research to complete it. Alan felt cold. The risks. The alternative is extinction, Patterson said, flatly. The president has authorized deployment as soon as it's ready. When Alan returned to the lab, he found Samantha staring at new data on her screen. They've started landing troops, she said quietly. Chicago is gone. London is under attack. Alan put his hand on her shoulder. There's something you need to know about Project Nightmare. As he explained, Samantha's expression changed from shock to determination. They've been developing this in secret? For years? Yes. And they need your help to finish it. Samantha closed her eyes briefly. The risks of unleashing something like this. I know. If it mutates, if it crosses between species. Sam, if we do nothing, there won't be a species left to worry about. She looked up at him, eyes shining with tears and determination. Then we better get it right. That night, as they worked, news came in of more cities falling. The Krell ground forces were nearly invulnerable to bullets, their exoskeletons deflecting even heavy artillery. In a rare, quiet moment, Alan and Samantha stood by a window looking at the stars now hidden by the massive shapes of Krell warships. Remember when we used to wish on stars? Samantha asked, leaning against his shoulder. I remember, Alan said, holding her close. What would you wish for now? Tomorrow, she said simply. Just tomorrow. They didn't speak of the project, of the samples being prepared, of the desperate gamble humanity was about to take. Instead, they held each other, watching the night sky that no longer belonged just to Earth. The next morning, the deadline would expire, and humanity would show the Krell that if they brought hell to Earth, humans were prepared to unleash something far worse in return. The 48 hours passed like a bad dream. Alan stood in the command center as the deadline expired, watching the screens with a grim expression. No one spoke. They all knew what was coming. All stations, prepare for impact, he said quietly, into his headset. The Krell attack began without warning or mercy. Beams of light shot down from the massive ships, turning cities to ash. Chicago disappeared in seconds. Then Madrid, then Sydney. Millions of lives erased in minutes. They're targeting population centers, Lisa said, her voice shaking as she monitored the communications. But avoiding military installations. They want us alive to see this, Alan replied. The experimental weapons they had rushed into production provided small victories. A modified electromagnetic pulse took down one of the smaller Krell ships over Brazil. It crashed into the Atlantic, the first alien casualty of the war. But for every small win, Earth lost 10 times more. By nightfall, 20 major cities were gone. Refugee camps formed in rural areas as people fled the destruction. Earth was burning, and the war had only just begun. Deep underground in Colorado, Samantha and her team worked frantically on Project Nightmare. The secret facility buzzed with activity as scientists combined their research with the black-budget project that had been waiting for this day. The Krell biology is responding to the pathogen, Samantha told the military panel watching her presentation. Their silicon-based cells have vulnerabilities we can exploit. General Patterson leaned forward. How soon can it be deployed? We need more testing. The simulations show it could spread rapidly through their forces, but there are still unknowns. We don't have time for unknowns, Doctor, Patterson said. The Krell have started landing ground troops. Samantha looked at the latest reports. Krell soldiers had begun to appear in the ruins of fallen cities. 8 feet tall with natural armor that deflected bullets, they moved with terrifying speed and precision. Give us 24 hours, she finally said. At least let us run one more test series. That night, news came in of the first human victory against Krell ground forces. A small squad led by Sergeant Greg Howard had managed to ambush a Krell patrol in the ruins of Denver. Even more importantly, they had captured one of the alien soldiers after it was injured by a building collapse. The wounded Krell was transported to the underground facility under heavy guard. Samantha met the convoy in the loading bay, her heart pounding as they wheeled in the container that held their prisoner. "It's sedated but stable," Greg told her. He was a compact man with steady hands and eyes that had seen too much in the past 2 days. "Nearly took out half my squad before we could contain it." Samantha approached the clear container. The Krell soldier was larger up close than she had expected. Its exoskeleton had a blue-black sheen, and its limbs ended in what looked like natural weapons, claws and spikes. "Thank you, Sergeant. This could change everything." While Samantha's team studied the captured Krell, now designated Subject K, Alan led the human counterattack. With conventional weapons proving ineffective, they relied on creativity and desperation. Mining equipment repurposed as sonic weapons. Industrial chemicals that could burn through even Krell armor. They fought street by street in the cities that remained, buying time with blood and courage. For every human that fell, they made sure to take a Krell with them. Lisa continued to monitor and decode Krell communications from a mobile command post. "They're collecting humans," she told Alan over a secure channel. "Taking them up to their ships. The transmissions mention specimens and worthiness testing." "How many?" Alan asked. "Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands." Alan closed his eyes briefly. Samantha had to finish Project Nightmare soon, or there wouldn't be a human race left to save. 3 days after the invasion began, Samantha made a breakthrough with Subject K. The aliens' blood samples had shown unexpected reactions to the pathogen they were developing. "It's not just attacking their nervous system," she explained to her team. "It's triggering something in their genetic code, almost like it's waking up dormant DNA." Her colleague, Dr. Paul Winters, looked concerned. "That could be unpredictable. We don't know what evolutionary defenses might be buried in their genome." "We don't have a choice," Samantha replied. "The Krell are advancing on our position. We deploy tomorrow." That evening, Alan arrived at the facility after 3 days of continuous fighting. His uniform was torn and stained, his face haggard with exhaustion. Samantha met him in the hallway, throwing her arms around him. "You're alive," she whispered. "Not for lack of trying otherwise," he said with a grim smile. He pulled back to look at her. "Tell me you have good news." They walked to the lab where Samantha showed him the final version of Project Nightmare. It looked innocuous, canisters of what appeared to be mist. "It's airborne, designed to target only Krell biology," she explained. "Once released, it should incapacitate them within hours." "Any risk to humans?" Samantha hesitated. "The simulations show minimal cross-species risk, but Paul has concerns about how it might affect the Krell on a genetic level." Before Alan could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. "They've found us," Lisa's voice came over the intercom. "Krell forces approaching from the north." Alan looked at the canisters. "We're out of time." Within minutes, they loaded Project Nightmare onto transport vehicles. The plan was to deploy it first in Arizona, where Krell forces had established their largest ground base. As they prepared to move out, the facility shook with the impact of Krell weapons. "They're targeting the surface installations," Greg reported, rushing into the lab. "We need to move now." Samantha quickly backed up their research data, sending copies to secure servers around the world. If this failed, someone else might be able to use their work. The evacuation began as the facility crumbled around them. Subject K watched from its containment unit as humans rushed past, its multiple eyes blinking in what might have been curiosity or fear. As Alan helped load the last of the canisters, he looked at Samantha. "If this works, we turn the tide. If it doesn't, then we go down fighting," she finished for him. They joined the convoy moving through emergency tunnels as the Krell forces breached the upper levels of the facility. Behind them, explosives were set to destroy what they couldn't take, including Subject K. No one saw the containment unit crack just before the charges detonated. Project Nightmare was on its way to deployment. Humanity's desperate gamble was about to begin, for better or worse. What they couldn't know was that the true nightmare was only just beginning. 3 months into the war, Earth was a different place. Cities lay in ruins, forests burned. Nearly half of the human population was dead or missing. The Krell controlled most major cities, turning them into bases for their operations. Alan Russell stood on a ridge in the Rocky Mountains, looking down at what had once been a small town. Now it served as a human stronghold, one of the few places where the Resistance had managed to hold back the Krell advance. Hidden under camouflage nets, the buildings housed what remained of Earth's fighting forces. "Captain, we've got the supply trucks coming in," said a young soldier. Alan nodded. "Get them unloaded quickly. We can't risk Krell patrols spotting them." He made his way down to the command center, a former town hall reinforced with whatever materials they could find. Inside, Lisa Winters worked at a bank of salvaged computers, monitoring Krell communications. "Any word from the Arizona base?" Alan asked. Lisa looked up, dark circles under her eyes. "Yes, and it's good news for once. Project Nightmare is working." 3 weeks earlier, they had deployed the bioweapon in Arizona, where the largest concentration of Krell ground forces had established a base. The results had exceeded their expectations. The pathogen spread rapidly through the Krell ranks, causing disorientation, hallucinations, and in many cases, death. "The Krell are pulling back from 3 more cities," Lisa continued. "Denver, Salt, Lake, and Phoenix are all reporting Krell withdrawals." For the first time in months, Alan felt a glimmer of hope. "And what about—" "She's here," Lisa said with a small smile. "Arrived an hour ago." Alan tried to hide his relief as he made his way to the research wing. Samantha stood at a workstation, examining data on a screen. When she saw him, her tired face broke into a smile. "Alan," she said, embracing him tightly. "It's working. Project Nightmare is actually working." They had been separated for weeks, with Samantha overseeing the production of more of the bioweapon at a hidden facility in Canada. Now, reunited, they could finally share a moment of victory. "We've started to push them back," Alan confirmed. "But we're getting strange reports from the field." Samantha's smile faded. "What kind of reports?" "The infected Krell. They're not all dying. Some are exhibiting unusual behaviors." Before Samantha could respond, Greg Howard entered the room. The sergeant looked exhausted but energized. "Captain, Doctor," he greeted them. "You're going to want to see this." He led them to a secure room in the basement. Inside, behind thick glass, stood a Krell soldier. But it looked different from those they had encountered before. Its exoskeleton had developed new growths, almost like extra armor, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural blue light. "Subject K," Samantha whispered, in shock. It survived. After the destruction of the Colorado facility, they had assumed the captured Krell had died. Instead, it had somehow escaped and followed them. "It showed up at our perimeter 2 days ago," Greg explained. "Didn't attack, just waited until we brought it in." "Has it communicated?" Alan asked. "That's the strange part. It speaks English." Now, as if on cue, Subject K moved closer to the glass. "The worthy rise," it said in a raspy voice. "The ascension begins." Lisa joined them, carrying a tablet. "I've been translating more Krell communications. They're in chaos. The infected are turning on the uninfected. It's like they formed a separate faction." Samantha's face paled. "The genetic changes. That's what I was afraid of." She explained how Project Nightmare seemed to be activating dormant genes in the Krell biology, triggering changes they hadn't anticipated. "We need to learn more," she said, looking at Subject K. "It chose to come to us. Maybe it can tell us what's happening." Under heavy guard, they entered the holding room. Subject K watched them with its glowing eyes. "Why did you come here?" Alan asked directly. "To warn," Subject K replied. "What you created. It awakens the old ones." With Lisa's help translating concepts that didn't easily convert to English, they learned a disturbing truth. The Krell had their own ancient myths about a plague called the Great Devourer that once nearly destroyed their species. Project Nightmare had somehow triggered something similar, awakening genetic code that had been dormant for millennia. The Krell commander wishes to speak, Subject K said finally. Zaxvorn seeks parley. The news stunned them. After months of relentless attacks, the Krell commander wanted to talk. That evening, a secure communication channel was established. Zaxvorn's image appeared on their main screen, his exoskeleton now marked with symbols they hadn't seen before. Captain Russell, the Krell commander began. Your weapon is effective, but you do not understand what you have unleashed. We understand enough, Alan replied coldly. You came to our world and slaughtered millions, and now we both face extinction, Zaxvorn said. The infected no longer follow Krell command. They speak of ascension and transformation. They are building something in your Arizona territory. Lisa confirmed this with recent satellite imagery. The infected Krell had taken over the former base and were constructing strange organic structures. After the communication ended, Alan, Samantha, and the others discussed their options. Could this be a trick? Greg asked. Get us to stop using the only weapon that works against them? I don't think so, Samantha said. The genetic changes I'm seeing in Subject K's new samples are profound. It's almost like it's evolving rapidly. Into what? Alan asked. No one had an answer. Later that night, Lisa burst into the command center with alarming news. I've intercepted communication between the infected Krell. They're not just fighting the uninfected anymore, they're organizing. And they've stopped referring to themselves as Krell. They call themselves the Ascended. Satellite images from across the country showed infected Krell gathering in massive numbers. In Arizona, their structures had grown larger, some resembling launch platforms. They're building ships, Alan realized. But why? Where would they go? Subject K provided the answer the next morning. The Ascended seek to spread the gift, first to all Krell, then to all life. Samantha's tests confirmed their worst fears. The pathogen was mutating, becoming more sophisticated. Project Nightmare, designed to save humanity, had created something potentially worse than the Krell invasion. We need to adapt, Alan said, as they gathered to plan their next steps. If the Krell are willing to communicate, we use that. We need to know everything they know about this great devourer from their history. As dawn broke over the Rocky Mountains, humanity found itself in an unthinkable position, considering an alliance with the very aliens who had come to conquer them, against a threat they had created themselves. And somewhere in Arizona, the Ascended continued to build, prepare, and evolve. The uneasy truce between humans and the uninfected Krell began with small steps. A Krell scientist named Vorlak arrived at the Rocky Mountain base under heavy guard. The tall alien moved with careful precision, aware of the hostile glares from human soldiers who had lost friends and family to the invasion. Samantha met Vorlak in the research lab that had been set up for their joint work. Though they couldn't shake hands, they exchanged formal nods of recognition. Your weapon is both brilliant and terrible, Vorlak said, his voice translated through a device at his throat. We underestimated your species. We didn't know what it would do, Samantha replied honestly. We were desperate. Together they began studying samples from the Ascended, the infected Krell who were rapidly evolving into something new. Under the microscope, the changes were even more dramatic than they had first thought. The cells are reorganizing, Vorlak explained, pointing to the screen, creating new neural pathways, new organs. The nightmare pathogen didn't just attack our biology, it rewrote it. Meanwhile, Alan and Lisa prepared for a dangerous mission. With information provided by Zaxvorn, they planned to infiltrate the Krell mothership that still orbited Earth. If they could access the Krell historical archives, they might find information about the ancient plague that had similarities to what they now faced. It's too risky, Samantha told Alan the night before the mission. We're just starting to understand the Ascended. We need more time. We don't have more time, Alan replied, showing her the latest satellite images. The Ascended had completed their first organic ships in Arizona. Strange vessels that looked grown rather than built, pulsing with internal light. Intelligence suggested they were preparing to launch within days. The next morning, Alan led a small team, including Lisa, to a rendezvous point where Krell shuttles waited to transport them to the mothership. Greg Howard and his squad provided security, their weapons ready despite the truce. "I still don't trust them," Greg muttered to Alan. "Feels wrong. Working with the same monsters that destroyed Chicago. The enemy of my enemy," Alan replied, though he shared the sentiment. The journey to the Krell mothership was tense and silent. When they arrived, they were escorted to the central archive chamber, a vast room with crystalline data storage structures that glowed with information. Lisa worked quickly with her Krell counterparts, accessing records that dated back thousands of years. What they found confirmed their worst fears. "The Great Devourer," Lisa translated, reading from the ancient Krell texts, "a living weapon created to end a war with another species called the Vorn. But it evolved beyond control, developing a hive mind and the ability to incorporate the genetic advantages of every species it encountered. The Krell had nearly been destroyed before finding a way to force the Devourer into dormancy, not by killing it, but by somehow altering their own genetic code to make themselves resistant. That altered code was what Project Nightmare had reactivated." "There's more," Lisa said, her voice growing urgent. "The Krell didn't just come to Earth to expand their territory. They've been fleeing something they call the Void Hunger that destroyed their home systems." Alan looked at the Krell commander. "You were running away? All this destruction because you needed a new home?" Saxavorn's multiple eyes blinked in what might have been regret. "We have traveled for generations, staying ahead of the darkness. Earth was to be our final sanctuary." Before Alan could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. On the main viewing screen, they watched as the first of the ascended vessels launched from Earth, rising through the atmosphere on a direct course toward the mothership. Back at the Rocky Mountain base, Samantha and Vorlak made a disturbing discovery. The latest samples from Subject K showed human DNA incorporated into the Krell genetic structure. "They're not just evolving," Samantha said in horror. "They're adapting, taking genetic material from humans they've captured." Vorlak's reaction was equally alarmed. "This is beyond what the ancient texts described. The original Devourer could mimic other species. These Ascended are creating a hybrid form." Subject K, who had been helping with their research by providing samples, watched them with its glowing eyes. "The ascension brings perfection," it said. "All will be one. All will rise." For the first time, Samantha noticed that Subject K's eyes seemed more human than before. With distinguishable irises and pupils, its limbs had also changed, becoming less insect-like and more flexible. When she reported this to Vorlak, the Krell scientists suggested they attempt something dangerous, a direct neural link with Subject K to understand what was happening inside. The Ascended hive mind. "We have technology that can create a temporary connection," Vorlak explained. "It would allow one of us to see what they see, know what they know." "I'll do it," Lisa volunteered when she returned from the mothership mission. "I've spent months studying their language and thought patterns. I have the best chance of making sense of what I see." Despite protests from Alan and Samantha, Lisa prepared for the connection. The Krell attached delicate sensors to her temples and to similar points on Subject K's transformed head. For 30 seconds, Lisa's body went rigid as her mind connected with the Ascended consciousness. When the connection broke, she collapsed, shaking. "What did you see?" Alan asked when she could finally speak. "Everything," Lisa whispered. "They're building an armada. They plan to spread across the galaxy, perfecting all life forms they encounter, and they're starting with the remaining Krell colonies." The information brought back by Alan's team from the mothership archives offered a possible solution. The ancient Krell had developed a frequency that disrupted the hive mind of the original Devourer. If they could recreate it, they might be able to break the connection between the Ascended working day and night. Samantha and Vorlak modified the frequency to account for the human DNA now present in the Ascended. Meanwhile, reports came in of Ascended ships attacking Krell outposts in the solar system. They're evolving faster than we can respond, Samantha told Alan one night, the weight of exhaustion in her voice. Every day they incorporate more genetic material, become more adaptive. Then we hit them before they get stronger, Alan replied. We take the fight to their main hive. The plan took shape quickly. A joint human Krell force would attack the Arizona base, now a massive bioorganic structure that pulsed and grew like a living thing. They would deploy the disruption frequency at the heart of the hive, hoping to break the connection that made the Ascended so dangerous. As they prepared for the mission, Samantha made one final discovery. Examining the latest data, she realized that the Ascended weren't just incorporating human and Krell DNA. They were improving it, removing weaknesses, enhancing strengths. They're creating what they see as the perfect organism, she told Alan. Not destroying life, but transforming it. The implications were clear and terrifying. If the Ascended succeeded in their mission, humanity as they knew it would cease to exist, not through destruction, but through forced evolution into something no longer human. The attack would launch at dawn. One final attempt to stop what they had unleashed before it spread beyond Earth to the rest of the galaxy. Dawn broke over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. It would have been beautiful if not for the massive structure that rose from the Earth like an alien mountain. The main hive of the Ascended pulsed with internal light, its organic walls shifting and growing even as they watched. Alan stood with Zaxavorn on a ridge overlooking the target. Human and Krell forces had gathered in an unlikely alliance, united by the threat that neither species could face alone. Once we deploy the frequency disruptor at the central node, we'll have minutes at most to evacuate, Alan explained to the assembled team leaders. The hive will likely react violently when its connection is broken. Greg Howard and his squad would lead the ground assault, creating a diversion at the southern entrance. Meanwhile, Alan, Zaxavorn, and a small team would infiltrate through a secondary access point identified by their scouts. Samantha approached Alan as the teams made final preparations. She carried a small device, the frequency disruptor that she and Vorlak had created. It's keyed to target the specific brainwave patterns of the Ascended, she explained. It should break their hive connection without harming individual Krell or humans. Alan took the device. And if it doesn't work? Samantha met his eyes. Then Plan B is to destroy the entire hive with the nuclear options. They both knew what that meant. Thousands of captured humans were held within the hive structure. Intelligence suggested they were being studied, their DNA harvested for the Ascended's evolution. A nuclear strike would kill them all. The attack began at exactly 0600 hours. Greg's team hit the southern entrance with everything they had. Modified sonic weapons that could penetrate Ascended armor, experimental explosives that disrupted their biological systems. The Ascended responded immediately. Transformed Krell, now showing clear signs of human DNA integration, poured from the hive. They moved with frightening speed and coordination, their bodies covered in bioorganic armor that seemed to repair itself almost instantly. Using the diversion, Alan's team approached from the east, accompanied by Krell warriors who once would have been their enemies. They entered through a small opening in the hive wall, finding themselves in a twisting organic corridor that pulsed with light and seemed almost to breathe. The central node should be half a mile in, Lisa said, consulting the map they had constructed from reconnaissance data. She had insisted on joining the mission, arguing that her brief connection to the hive mind gave her insights no one else had. As they moved deeper into the structure, they encountered chambers where captured humans were held in transparent pods. The people inside appeared unconscious but alive, connected to the hive by thin tendrils. They're harvesting genetic material, Zaxavorn observed, creating a genetic library of your species. Alan fought the urge to stop and free the captives. We saved them all by completing the mission, he reminded himself. Near the center of the hive, they encountered the first sign that something had changed. An Ascended approached them, but instead of attacking, it spoke. We expected you, Alan Russell, it said in a voice that combined Krell clicks with human intonation. The creators come to see what they have made. More Ascended appeared surrounding them, but they made no move to attack. Instead, They parted, creating a path to the central chamber. "It's a trap," Zaxvorn warned. "Maybe," Alan agreed. "But it's also our only way forward." The central node was a vast spherical chamber, pulsing with blue-green light. At its center floated a being unlike any they had seen before, neither human nor Krell, but something new. Its body was symmetrical and beautiful in an alien way, with translucent skin that revealed complex organs and neural pathways glowing beneath. "We welcome the parents," the being said, its voice resonating directly in their minds. "Those who gave birth to our new form." Lisa stepped forward. "You're the hive mind, the central consciousness." "I am the first ascended," it replied. "The template for what all life can become." Alan kept his hand on the frequency disruptor, ready to activate. "You're abducting and experimenting on humans, attacking Krell colonies. That ends now." The first ascended's expression shifted in a way that might have been amusement. "You still think in terms of conflict and victory. We offer transformation, evolution, perfection." Images flooded their minds, visions of a galaxy where life evolved not through slow natural selection, but guided transformation, where suffering, disease, and death became optional, where consciousness could be shared across vast distances. "At the cost of what makes us human," Samantha said, having joined them through another entrance. "Our individuality, our choice." "Is choice so valuable when it leads to war, to the destruction you and the Krell brought to this world?" the first ascended asked. "We offer harmony." "Forced harmony is just another kind of prison," Alan replied. He raised the disruptor. "We choose our own path." The first ascended made no move to stop him. "You cannot unmake what has begun. Even if you break this hive, our ships have already reached the stars. The ascension spreads." Alan activated the device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the chamber began to vibrate. The light pulsing through the hive walls flickered and dimmed. The first ascended's expression changed to one of surprise, then pain. "Evacuation now," Alan ordered as the hive structure began to convulse around them. They ran through collapsing corridors, helping to free human captives along the way. The ascended they encountered seemed disoriented, their movements no longer coordinated, some fighting each other in confusion. Outside, the massive hive structure began to collapse in on itself as the hive-mind connection broke down. Greg's team had already freed hundreds of captives and fallen back to safe distances. Hours later, as the dust settled over the ruins of the Arizona hive, Alan, Samantha, Lisa, and Greg stood with Zaxvorn and Vorlak, watching the cleanup operations. "It worked better than we hoped," Samantha said. "The frequency disrupted not just their communication but the genetic changes themselves. Many of the transformed Krell are reverting to their original forms. But not all," Vorlak noted. "And not the ships that left Earth." Lisa's expression was troubled. The first ascended wasn't lying. "Before the hive mind broke, I sensed their ships heading toward other star systems. Dozens of them, each carrying the means to start new hives." "Then the war isn't over," Alan said. "It's just beginning." Zaxvorn turned to face the humans. "Once we came to conquer your world, now we find ourselves asking for your help. The ascended threat requires both our peoples to face it." "And what about the void hunger that drove you to Earth in the first place?" Samantha asked. "One battle at a time," the Krell commander replied. That night, as Earth began the long process of rebuilding, a transmission came in from deep space. Lisa was the first to translate it. "It's not from the Krell," she said in surprise. "It's from another species altogether. They've detected the ascended ships and recognized the pattern from their own history." The message was simple but profound. "You who created the new devourer, we need your help. You who brought something worse than hell, you may be our only hope." Alan looked up at the stars, no longer filled with only Krell ships. The galaxy had become a much larger and more dangerous place. Humanity had survived the Krell invasion only to face a threat of their own making, and yet, in doing so, they had also found their place among the stars. "Send a reply," he told Lisa. "Tell them we're coming." The war for Earth was over. The war for the galaxy had just begun.